Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Tom Jensen. We continue our fishing reports this week. We're visiting with Fred Ryckman. Fred is the fisheries supervisor for the Northwest District. He's also in charge of paddlefish. So we're going to talk about that too today. Let's start with your district lakes, Fred. You've got some real gems in some of the smaller lakes in your district.
Yeah, we have, it's interesting, I guess, in the Northwest we don't have a lot of new water bodies like the South Central or Southeast with a lot of additional water storage areas. The Northwest is pretty well drained, so we're still dealing with most of the lakes that have been there for a number of years, not a lot of new water bodies, but there are certainly some unique ones and some good fishing in the Northwest waters, even though we don't have nearly the variety in terms of numbers as we have in other places in the state.
You do have quite a wide variety of fish in your district, and I want to talk about them individually. Let's start with kind of the bread and butter fish in North Dakota, the walleye.
All right. Walleye populations in the Northwest, not a great numbers of them. Certainly Lake Darling is a high population of walleyes and a good fishery. It hasn't been especially red hot this summer or this winter, but I expect this summer will be good again. Northgate Dam has got a developing population, looks really good. McGregor Dam actually has quite a few walleyes in it. They did fairly well this last summer. McLeod, the lake right at Ray, has pretty good numbers of them. And then Blacktail, of course, has got walleye populations. They do fairly well in there at time. And Trenton Lake, again, connected to the Missouri River system, so there's quite a few walleyes move into that from the Missouri River, and they do fairly well in times in there.
I'm pretty sure most bodies of water you have in your district are full of northern pike.
Well, we have fair numbers of pike in places. Yeah, Cottonwood Lake at Alamo has been really popular. Early bite there this winter was really good. Guys were catching limits of pike in short order. Powers Lake has got a number of pike in them. Smeshik Lake actually has some big pike and quite a few blacktail. It's interesting. We stopped stocking northern pike in many of the Northwest District lakes several years ago, and there's at least as many pike now, if not more, in some of those water bodies than even when we stocked it. So there's quite a few pike numbers up there. Trenton Lake, again, still a lot of pike in it. The Little Muddy River on the east side of town had a pretty good population of pike. I'm not so sure how the recent brine spill impacted that, but I think there's going to be pretty good fishing in that Little Muddy then too, with northern pike population in there.
Okay, let's talk about panfish.
Panfish. Dakota Ray has a variety of bluegill perch. It's got some nice largemouth bass in it. Leland Dam, really good bluegill population there. Northgate Dam has got bluegills and some crappies, really good fishery. Cottonwood Lake at Alamo, I mentioned, they got a lot of northern pike in it, but it also has a pretty good population of perch. The winter before, they were catching a lot of quality size perch. This last winter they've been smaller, but there's still a lot of perch there as well. McGregor Dam has been a good perch fishery for a number of years, and so there's some fair fisheries up there for panfish. For bluegills, Northgate Dam, really a good spot as well.
You have the luxury, unlike a lot of the districts around the state, Fred, in that you have trout in some of your lakes.
We've got trout populations. We actually have some browns. Kettle Lake has got browns and rainbow trout in it. We've stocked a few browns in other water bodies, not doing so well right now, but rainbow trout, we have a number of trout lakes for sure. Again, Northgate Dam has got a large population of trout. McGregor, Coteray, Sather, and Leland had been stocked with trout. We discontinued that. I don't think there are any left down in there, but we have fair and the populations, and then we have some of the urban fisheries where we stock some of the small ponds right in town, Williston Park ponds, Watford City Pond. We stock a few of those with trout too. More as a pert and take type fishery. We don't have a lot of winter survival in those places, but it provides a short-term fishery for those that are interested in trout.
Great place to take kids.
Good, fun, close to town, ride bike to fish type fishery. Yeah.
A lot of our viewers, Fred, like to listen for the Sleeper Lakes feature that we put in all of these things. Of course, a sleeper lake, someplace that really doesn't get fished a lot, places that people might not know about that are pretty good fisheries and things. Give me a couple examples.
All right. Well, Skirmo Lake in the northwest corner of the state, about as far north as west as you can go. Good population of northern pike. Had some nice perch in there. They're making a comeback, but it's a good spot for northern pike and perch, but it's also well off the beaten path. It's a nice quiet spot. It's a nice lake, clear water, so if you like to swim and play in it, it's a good spot. And then Leland Dam also is a really good spot down in McKenzie County. Forest Service land down in that area, so it's part of the Badlands. It's not heavily impacted by oil industry yet, so you can go down to Leland and get away from the world too. It's pretty nice down there. Coteray again is one of my favorite spots. It's it's a lot busier than it used to be in that area, but at least the dam itself is still pretty nice.
All right, we're going to shift gears now and switch to paddlefish season. Okay. It is approaching quickly. When is the opener this year?
May 1st, this traditional opener on paddlefish, but yeah, it's only several weeks away, so it'll come up soon.
All right. We, of course, talk about the harvest cap every year. Now, are you higher or lower this year?
We're still at 1,000 fish. We've had that harvest cap for, more than 10 years now, so we've stayed at that 10 fish or 1,000 fish harvest cap. There's been some discussions about maybe that's too high, but at least there's no plans to change that in the near future, at least. Certainly for this year, it'll still be 1,000 fish. 95-year class has been comprising half of the harvest of the males that are being harvested for the last 6-7 years. And in Montana, much more than that. 70% of the harvest last year in Montana was just on 95-year class fish.
How do you know they came out of the 95-year class?
We take jaw samples from virtually every fish that's harvested, or at least every fish that goes through the cleaning operations at the confluence or at intake. A jaws sample is taken, that jaw is aged, and we age them back to again, vast majority of them are aged back to the 95-year class. We also have some coated wire tagged fish out there. We've had about 325 returns of coated wire tagged fish, and just absolutely positively all of those fish are 95-year class. We just
How big is a 20-year-old paddlefish?
Oh man, that's interesting too. The males and females really have sexual dimorphism. So the males, we've still got some out there in the low 20s. The females in the upper 50s to 60 already. So to look at a paddlefish, you really can't tell how old it is, because again, that 95-year class, which is coming on 20 years old this year, excuse me, some of them are 20 pounds, so they've gained a pound a year. Others are 60 pounds, so they've gained 3 pounds a year. So it really depends on the sex, and then even amongst the males and the females, there's quite a bit of variation too.
Paddlefish season success, the snagging season, is pretty much dependent a lot on water levels in the rivers that are involved, Fred. We haven't had much snowfall in North Dakota this year, but of course snowpack in the mountains has a big bearing on that. How do you think conditions are looking so far?
Well, again, there's no plain snow, and so there'll be no plain snowpack runoff. It's already over with. The mountain snowpack really depends on the weather fronts and the conditions out there. Typically we have lower river stages. May 1st opener last year was an exception. We had pretty high flows already. A lot of the fish were up in the Yellowstone River and further upstream, so we had the shift of fishermen up into the Yellowstone River. It looks like this year may not be so much water, or at least not as much as last year. I think the fish will still be in North Dakota. There's pretty good numbers of paddlefish out there, so I suspect it'll be a pretty good opening. It's hard to tell when that mountain snowpack will come down. Again, it depends on the weather in the mountains.
We haven't heard a lot about the lottery. Of course, the legislature gave Game and Fish the right to have a lottery if we think we need it. We haven't had one yet, but where are we on that, Fred?
Right. That was exactly how it was passed too. The legislature gave us authority to establish a season if we saw fit or thought it was the appropriate thing to do. We had talked about it, evaluated it very closely, sought public input on it, and the thought was that, at least from the fisherman's standpoint, it was a lot of them that did not want to go to a lottery. We still have that 1,000 fish harvest cap, which regulates the harvest, so although the fishery is sometimes a lot more congested and busy than we'd like, we can control this amount of activity in the harvest with that 1,000 fish harvest cap, and so the lottery system has been postponed at least for the foreseeable future, and again, no change planned for 2015.
Okay. I'm going to delve into your knowledge of your district here, Fred. My final question, if you could take the day off, grab the family, go fishing, any place in your district, any species, where would you go and what would you do?
Well, early season, again, it'd be good to get into some trout waters, but Northgate Dam is a good spot. You can almost always catch fish there if you were to go there. Once waters start to warm up a little bit and you get into the early season, it's really good going out to Leland because it's the farthest south water body in my district. It warms up the fastest, and so it's got fish that are primed and ready to be caught earlier than in some of my other waters. And again, Leland's a nice spot.
Fred, thanks. Now we move on to our report from the Red River and its supervisor, Todd Caspers. Todd, the Red's a little different in that it's co-managed with the state of Minnesota, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The North Dakota Game and Fish Department helps the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources in managing the fishery on the Red River. And what that entails is we basically help them with manpower and whatnot during their fish population surveys.
Okay. What are the licensing requirements on there, Todd? I suppose if you're fishing one side, you need a North Dakota. If you need a fishing the Minnesota side, you need a Minnesota license?
Yeah, in general, whatever state you're standing on is the license you would need, unless you're in a boat, which then I believe either license suffices if you're in a boat.
Okay. Let's talk about the Red itself. It is a very diverse fishery in that it has a lot of different species.
Yeah, overall there's about 70 different species, but in terms of game fish species, it's mostly channel catfish, walleye, sauger, northern pike, a few smallmouth bass.
Okay, let's talk about the species one at a time, Todd. First, let's concentrate on, I guess, the bread and butter fish for the Red, the channel catfish, like you mentioned.
Yeah, the channel catfish fishery in the Red is known nationwide for the most part for size of channel catfish. And the bigger catfish tend to be farther north in the river. You'll run into more fish in the southern parts of the river, but they tend to be a little smaller.
There are times the Red River, Todd, can be a world-class walleye fishery.
Yeah, there's a good walleye population as well.
Big fish.
Yeah, and there's some nice fish taken every year. And sauger populations are pretty good too, but although they tend to run on the small side compared to walleyes.
Okay. Can you pinpoint some of the areas that are best for walleye fishing?
Oh, you know, anywhere that concentrates fish, like in the springtime you might have some fish up below the dams or the rock structures that kind of hold up fish movement for a time.
Okay. How about northerns?
Oh, northern populations are doing pretty well as well.
In the past, Todd, there's been some construction on the Red River in that the replacement of low-head dams. Most of that, I guess, for safety, correct?
Yeah, but that has repercussions for the fish populations as well. It allows fish to move upstream and downstream a lot more freely than they used to, and that helps their populations. The Drayton Dam still exists, but fish can move over that in high water as well.
Okay. Todd, I'm going to ask you the same question that I've asked everybody else, and yours is a little more restricted because you've only got the river to choose from. But if you could take the afternoon off, go fishing any place on the Red for any species in the Red, what would you do and where would you go?
Oh, I might try below Riverside Dam. It's not really a dam anymore, but below Riverside Dam in Grand Forks, and probably just try to catch some walleyes from shore.
This early in the season, I would guess it's not really time for channels
Yeah,
yet.
it's probably a little early, but it's probably a lot more early for channel catfish, so I'd probably just try for walleyes, I think.
All right, Todd, thanks. For a complete list of fishable lakes in North Dakota and a list of boat ramps, plus stocking reports and lots of other useful information, check out the March-April edition of North Dakota Outdoors magazine. It has directions to a lake you might want to check out, whether or not the lake has public access, and also what species exist in the lake. The information is also available on the Game and Fish website, along with topographical maps of your favorite lake. The website address is gf.nd.gov. For Todd Caspers, for Fred Ryckman and the rest of the staff here at North Dakota Game and Fish, thanks for joining us for Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.